Good morning. As you know, we've been looking at some of the great feasts of Israel, showing that God is working to a pattern. He is developing patterns for us to follow. Because we see these patterns, we can begin to understand what it is that he's doing and see it more clearly in the context of our own lives. Today is, of course, Wednesday, and this year, Christmas Day is following, and a couple of days later on Friday. And so for a moment now, I want to stop and think about not the pattern so much, but what is happening with this actual family. You see, we get a picture painted for us, a picture which is shown off in all sorts of stories and tales about this particular journey. But we have to stop and think about the reality of this journey. So let's think about some details. First of all, Mary would have been planning for this journey for some time. She knew it was going to come, and she knew she had to get to Bethlehem for the birth. When Caesar called for the census to be called in, and the people had to go back to Bethlehem, then Joseph knew he would have to be there to register. But there was no need for Mary to go with him. The call was for the men to go to register who they were, where they were living, what their jobs were, etc., so that the Caesar would have a census. And then they would tell the officials how many children they had and all the other details that the census takers were taking down. But it is Mary, I'm sure, who has said to Joseph quite clearly, "I am coming with you." And by now, of course, Joseph, having heard the message of the angel, and her family realizing that this is something very special, would have supported her in what she wanted to do, even though it was a strange request. She was, after all, almost 9 months pregnant. But they would have known before they set out that the child would be born in Bethlehem, because that is what Micah the prophet had promised. So they knew that this child would be born in Bethlehem during this particular season. So Joseph would have also known that though he was making the journey with Mary, he was not going to be returning with other people to their homes, because Mary, having given birth to the child, would have to stay in Bethlehem for some time. She'd have to stay there, quite simply, because she'd be breastfeeding the child. And breastfeeding the child is be very careful not to exert herself at this time, because if her milk had dried up because of extreme exertion, then the child would be in danger. So Joseph would have known, even as he traveled, that he was going to be staying in Bethlehem for some time. Now, as well as Joseph traveling with her, her father would have been going. If she had any brothers or uncles, they would have been going. All those of the line of David would be setting out at this time for Bethlehem in order to register. Now, again, the picture is given us of Mary riding on a donkey. Now, you don't put a 9-month-old woman on the back of a donkey. In fact, she probably traveled to Bethlehem in a cart. They had these great carters traveling across Israel who would pick up people and goods and transport them across the country. And I'm sure that as a family, they would have probably hired one of these carts to enable the family to get to Bethlehem with Mary on this occasion. Joseph would have been made sure he took all his tools with him, because if he went to Bethlehem, he would have to work there as a carpenter to support his family at this time. All these things are going on. And I can't believe as well for one moment that Anna, Mary's mother, would have let her travel on this journey, knowing she was about to give birth to her firstborn child. I am sure if Mary was going, no matter what Eli, her father, would have said, if Mary was going, I can see Anna saying to her husband, "I am going as well. I'm going to keep an eye out for my daughter and be with her when she gives birth in this way." So it's not quite the picture we are often shown on Christmas cards. Not just 2 people and a donkey, but in fact probably a very large group of people all traveling up to Bethlehem for this particular occasion. Now again, of course, we are celebrating this in December, on December the 25th. But in fact, the chances are, as I've said before, this was not happening at the end of December. This is Jesus' official birthday. His actual birthday was probably again on another great feast of the Jews, which we've been talking about. And this would have been the Feast of Tabernacles, when the people were rejoicing in the fact that, in fact, God had been with them in the wilderness, and the tabernacle had traveled with them in the wilderness for those 40 years. God being with them and tabernacling with them. And it's amazing that when John speaks about the birth of Jesus, it says the Word became flesh. He doesn't say dwelt. It says the Word became flesh and tabernacled with us. In other words, he's almost trying to show people that, in fact, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, he was again almost Christianizing a great feast of the Jews. The birth, God coming into the world and being born in the world in this way. Amen.